Hello, folks. This is a very somber edition of the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast. Last week, we received the very sad news of the passing of the King of Belts, Mr. Reggie Parkes. I know other people knew Reggie far more intimately than I did. I was privileged enough to talk with Reggie quite frequently over the past few years. As you can hear from the interviews, he was a very softly spoken man. I think it was this way because he had nothing to prove. I'm pretty sure in his day he was a legitimate tough guy, but didn't have to prove it to anyone. Reggie grew up on a farm on the outskirts of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Early on he boxed and wrestled, before becoming a professional wrestler, working in carnivals, taking on all comers. Reggie could probably still hold his own today. Until a couple of weeks ago, he would still hit the gym a few times a week, drive himself around in his old van, have a bet at the casinos and a drink at a biker bar. He loved catching up with superstar Bret Hart, who would make time each year to meet with him during the Canadian summer. Reggie had been trained by Bret's father, the late Stu Hart. Reggie also enjoyed attending the annual Cauliflower Alley Club reunions. Sadly, this year's would be his last, as, along with a number of other event goers, he contracted COVID-19, eventually succumbing to the illness shortly after attending the reunion. He was an old-fashioned gentleman. He was far, far too polite to say no to you. He would just gracefully change the subject in a soft way that you would know that he didn't want to talk about a particular thing, so don't bother asking him again. Reggie had a girlfriend, a woman about his age. I'm not sure if he ever had any children. We never spoke about that. Although we did speak about my kids, and he would often laugh when I told him about how my girls loved touching the new belts I had delivered because they were all new and shiny. When I first started to talk to Reggie, he hadn't made a belt in about 5 years. He didn't even know people still wanted his stuff or were waiting. I honestly don't believe he knew of the extent of the outstanding order situation. The way he explained it to me was Rico Mann would take orders and he would tell Reggie how to plate, paint and what leather cut was required. I'm unsure of who ordered the plates. Reggie knew that Tucson Trade Engravers, the company who had etched his plates, had gone out of business, but he was hopeful that Rico Mann or Dave Milliken could find new etchers. In the time I spoke with Reggie, he legitimately did not know how many orders were outstanding. I never really went into the full extent of it with Reggie. It's a difficult situation. I didn't have an outstanding order myself, so it was really none of my business. I'd heard the rumours that he had dementia. I think that's bullshit. My grandfather on my mother's side had dementia, and towards the end he didn't even know what day it was or who his wife was. Reggie was just old, and he had his good days and his bad. Some days were really bad. But he always knew who I was, and although he sometimes told me the same story several times, I humoured him like it was the first time I'd heard it. He sometimes was lost for a name or a word, like relief banner or belt tip, but he always knew what he wanted to say. He also knew his work wasn't what it once was, but he tried to do the best and do something of quality. He knew about bootlegs, and he knew he did better, even at his age. He couldn't understand why people would settle for something other than the best, and he was the best. There's some talk of Reggie's more recent leather being done by someone else. I don't believe that to be true. Every strap with a Reggie Parkes signature stamp on it was done by him. Like his memory, his leather work at the end was hit and miss. But when he was on, he knocked that leather out of the park, as good as when he was in his prime. He knew what his belts were worth, but he really didn't care. He was in it for the love of the craft. I believe he and I bonded because I was from Australia, and he had spent time here as a wrestler in the 60s, well before my time. He would often tell stories of the Australian society my grandparents lived through, and he got a kick out of someone from down under still being interested in his work. Had I made the connection with him pre-marriage, pre-kids and pre-COVID, I would have made the trip to Tucson, Arizona and met up with him in person. I have no doubt, had I asked, he would have mentored me the same way he did with Dave Milliken, because generosity and Reggie Parkes went hand in hand. Then again, had I made the connection earlier, he may not have passed on to me the knowledge that he did. I firmly believe he knew that he had more miles behind him than in front, and he was comfortable with that. That's where I take some comfort, and I don't feel so sad. From the man I knew, Reggie Parkes lived his life his way, on his terms. He did what he wanted to do, but he did it in a way that didn't hurt or impose on anybody else. He was a true free spirit, and that's a really hard concept for most people to get their heads around. His biggest concern would be that he left his girlfriend behind, as he would not want her to be grieving. He would be far, far too modest to think that anyone else would even be remotely affected by his passing. The outpouring of emotion on social media is a testament to his legacy. I'm sure he would be glad to be getting the accolades, but at the same time, he would already have the confidence to know that he had a positive impact during his time here on Earth. While I have other stories, they might be for another time. While my heart is still aching, I know the man I was privileged to know for such a short while would be gently steering us towards the positives his life left upon us. My deepest sympathies and condolences go to his family. His legacy will last forever. Valet, Reggie Parks.